Nothing could have prepared me for the journey that Richard Gadd was taking me on with Baby Reindeer. Everyone's talking about it, so now it's my turn. We follow Donnie Dunn as he navigates his career as a Scottish comedian in London, all while being plagued by a serial stalker known as Martha. We digest the world of Baby Reindeer through Dunn's narration, where he explains the unraveling of events in conjunction with how these events are making him feel, as if it were happening in real time. Rather than just seeing the story unfold for what it is, we get to share and have an opinion on our character's stream of consciousness. Without knowing it, the style of narration forces us to have an intimate and more personal approach to our viewership, which is why I feel like this show could not leave me. A well-written show will subtly coerce you into drawing definitive opinions that you thought were original, conclusions that you thought you came to on your own. You're under the impression that you have autonomy in how you perceive what you're viewing, but you really don't. Effective writing is just that powerful. Baby Reindeer stops me from having a concrete opinion on both the characters and the subject matter at hand by constantly switching between differing perspectives. I couldn't anchor myself into any feelings that were evoked because of how fleeting and temporary they became. There are moments where I despise Martha, yet in the same breath, I pity her, I feel for her, I feel sorry that she lives her life in the way that she does. And the same thing with Dunn. There are times where I'm so frustrated with his choices or way of thinking when he can be irrational, hasty, and even crude, yet in the same breath, I'm thinking about what it was that led him to making these choices. I feel bad for the predicaments he's found himself in, even if they're self-inflicted. Your environment and personality definitely play a huge role in your development and decision-making, but Baby Reindeer showcases a scope beyond the argument for nature versus nurture. Sometimes, be it bad or good, things happen and people are the way they are, just because. There isn't always a rhyme or reason for everything, and the challenges Dunn faces exemplify that. However, that isn't to excuse self-destructive behavior, which we see a lot of in Baby Reindeer. There are many times throughout the show where Dunn inserts himself into situations that will most definitely end poorly for him, yet he does so anyway. It's during these times that I'm looking at my TV screen thinking, are you stupid or are you dumb? But everything always makes more sense from the outside looking in. You can't tell me you haven't acted on impulse or made poor decisions in spite of knowing the consequences of your actions. He doesn't justify his actions either. Instead, he states them for what they are, acknowledging the absurdity or immorality behind them, and interrogates why he has these impulses or where they came from. Which, again, is something a lot of us can relate to. Nobody likes to admit that they make bad choices. His narration lets us know that he's very aware of his toxicity and problematic behavior. If anything, he narrates exactly what the audience is thinking. So, as a viewer, I'm thinking, where do we go from here? I don't know. The crux of the show for me is how a lot of the encounters Dunn faces stem from his own neglected turmoil. He blurs the line between having problems and being the problem. This isn't to belittle any of his challenges or tragedies, but rather, his character development is a prime example of where a demented self can take you. His ways of coping and processing his experiences, or lack thereof, leaves him in a present state that is stuck in his past. The graphic abuse that Dunn faces in his 20s is traumatic enough in its own right, but the person who he becomes because of that is the person that we see unfold through his interactions with Martha. Yes, the person he becomes is a victim of a horrific incident, but he is also a person making conscious decisions, knowing right from wrong. The path of experiencing and healing is not linear, as is the human condition. Dunn embodies a very real, very troubled, and very complex character, though instead of being a victim of his circumstances, he becomes a victim of himself. Aside from how evil and dark the show gets, Dunn himself is a very, very relatable character. He's a guy in his 20s chasing his dream in the city. His career in comedy is stagnant, he works at a bar to pay the bills, he has difficulty finding love in his life, his confidence and self-esteem is low, etc. He's either you or someone you know. This trope is really common. Dunn's narration is what sets him apart because he says what a lot of us think, and he says what many of us are too afraid to admit ourselves. But the reason as to why Dunn is such a believable protagonist is because he is real and he is Richard Gadd. I understand that not everyone will perceive his content in the way his fans have and that this show may not be everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine, to each their own, but you cannot deny the courage it takes to showcase the most vulnerable and crippling moments of your life on screen for the world to judge. There's the argument that nobody really asked him to do this, which, again, fair, but studies show creativity as being a cathartic means of processing and healing from trauma as violent as his. He had something to share, and so he did. I'm sure being greenlit by a media giant like Netflix means he had to water down his story here and there, shrinking his original act from what it was to what it is now in the series. But irrespective of that, it felt very personal. There are so many videos out there on this show because 1, it's a really good show, and 2, people are coming forth sharing their own experiences. experiences they were once too afraid to reveal but have now done so because of the confidence Gadd had to share his. I really enjoyed the show for what it was. It was entertaining, it was insightful, and emotional. It was the portrayal of a very real life, even if that life was entirely foreign to me. You can sense how much he cares about the topics he explores through this show. His approach to his stalking, his abuse, his relationships, and his career are raw, honest, and articulate. At its core, storytelling is often an extension of oneself. It's a deeply personal connection you form with whatever it is that you produce, and that connection is blaringly obvious in Baby Reindeer. It's content that matters, made by someone who cares,